Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a comic creator, writer, artist, and I am sharing my creative process with you online. If you'd like to support the creation of these videos and see more behind the scenes work in depth into my creative process, bonus videos, you can go to patreon.com/Jeremy. If you'd like to read some previews of my comics, see the work that I'm creating, get a good look at the current series I'm working on, Morningstar, which is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. And if you would like to buy some of my comics, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. Are you all .netted out now? All right, so let's get into it. Last week, I started sharing with you the process of me working on graytones for the most recent issue, issue 7, which is the second to last issue of the series. By the way, I'm still futzing with the system, with the settings in terms of having my live stream on while I'm working. So if there's any problems with the audio or video or something just goes weird and wonky while this is playing, let me know. And, just mention in the comments in the chat. Anyway, so Morningstar issue 7. So I started graytoning this issue last week. And I thought that I would probably be spending almost all of February graytoning this issue and then jamming like hell to get the cover done in time to get it off to the printer. Let's see. Oh, I see Ian Rox is in the chat, and he actually mentioned that he had ordered a couple of my books online, and they should be getting from Amazon. They should be arriving soon. He ordered my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, my art book, Wound, and Samurai, which is an anthology that I contributed a story to. Ian Rox, you rock. Thank you so much for supporting my work. I really appreciate it. Oh, one more thing. I almost forgot one of the most important things. My Patreon subscribers. We've got a new subscriber this week. I want to thank Kit Steele so much for pledging at my $2 level. I really appreciate the support. You make these videos possible. I really appreciate it and want to give you a public acknowledgement, so thank you so much. Now, Morningstar issue 7. So I started graytoning this issue last week, and I thought I would be spending most of February working through it, but so far I have already got the first 12 pages already graytoned. It's a 28-page issue, so I'm going faster than I thought I would be. Hopefully by the end of next week, hopefully by next week's live stream, I'll be working on the cover, which will probably take me, you know what? I'm not going to put a cap on it. Maybe it'll go super, super fast, and I'll be done with that and get the book off to the printer early. Maybe it'll take a whole month to finish, and I'll just barely get it done on time. I don't know. We'll see. No reason to put caps on it. But one thing that I noticed in this process is when I get started, I'm going to pull this up 3 pages at once. And because I am OCD, I'm going to drag these around in a different order because I want to have them up on the screen in the order I am working on them. But in Photoshop, you can change the way you have your images laid out. You can have it position them in a grid. And what I like to do when I first start any page is to block in just the sky and the figures, and I like to do all of that actually having 3 pages up at once and jumping around. The reason for this is because it helps keeping me getting too bogged down into details too early on. It's very easy when you're working on any phase, where it's penciling, inking, gray tones, to just get caught up in details and put way too much detail than you would normally have. And I find that having 3 pages at once kind of forces me to jump around. Now I have to give a special shout out here to page 14, because any of you long-time listeners will know that I've mentioned my buddy, comic book veteran Carl Altstetter. So Carl actually jumped in, and as a great creator he is, he always likes to play with other artists and have fun, see what they're doing. So he wanted to ink a page of Morningstar over my layouts. I was honored to have him do that. So when you see this issue in print, If you wonder why page 14 has a slightly crisper style, the characters have a little bit more energy and spring to them, that's that Carl Altstetter seasoning. Let me turn off my this little tone strip I've got there in the corner so you can get a better look at some of Carl's art here. So this page, I did the layouts, Carl inked, and I think he did a fantastic job. In fact, it's always a little infuriating. Sometimes friends of mine offer to do pieces, or they'll do a piece just for fun. Like my buddy Jesse Toves did one. I had another friend of mine who did a piece. And whenever they draw my characters, I always feel like they draw them better than I do. But it's honoring and humbling, and I'm happy to have them contribute to Morningstar. So that's this page. All right, let's get these back to where I had them. All right. So let's start over here with this splash page. Okay. So, and I have found that even though I have these little color strips here over on the side, excuse me, for some reason I've got a frog in my throat this morning. But drink a little water, take a water break. One more thing I'm going to mention now, because I'm going to try and remember before the show ends, but just on the offhand chance that I do forget, I at least mentioned it once, which is that later on today, I am probably going to do a few test streams to try and set it up the way you can schedule an event on YouTube. For some reason, my particular settings, the way I have my streaming set up, it doesn't seem to launch straight from I don't seem to be able to launch straight from my stream into an event when I'm streaming from my computer, as opposed to when I'm streaming from my phone. And I'm pretty sure that it's just a settings issue, because I know lots of other creators do it. So I'm gonna have to tweak my settings and mess around a little bit. But what that means is it's very likely you're gonna see, if you're subscribed to the channel, a few more posts later today that I'm streaming. These aren't gonna be bonus episodes. This isn't anything special. It's just going to be streaming, testing to see if the stream is working and if people are seeing it. And that's going to be something that I'm probably going to be doing later on in the afternoon. So if you see a couple more notifications later today that I'm streaming, you can ignore those. They're not going to be anything exciting. They're just going to be me online going test 1, 2, 1, 2. You're not missing any super special stuff. So I will try to also mention that at the end of the show in case people are watching live and they come in late. But, just letting you know. And usually when I am gray toning, I used to avoid using the paint bucket and in terms of filling in large areas, because I found that it would always leave a little tiny line of color right around the edge of what I'm doing. See, that's what I was talking about. This little gray line. It used to, well, here's the thing. I was using my laptop in gray toning, and what I found is that when I did that, these lines seemed to disappear. And I was like, oh, I don't need to worry about this anymore. So I need to double check and make sure that my the files that I already did don't have these little lines there, because I don't want that to show up in print. But when I tried it on my laptop and I noticed that the lines weren't there, and it was just setting the paint bucket to a higher tolerance and to anti-aliasing, it seemed to be much better. Well, it definitely speeds up your time. And I was like, oh, great. I can start using this tool this way again. But now it's a little bit of a bummer that what I thought was working well is not. So yeah, I'm just going through here, separating the character from the background. And I don't go in and do proper flats the way a true color artist would do. One, because it's in black and white, and two, because the way that I'm coloring this, I'm really just keeping it down to like one particular tone. I'm not really going in and adding a lot of rendering with the color. So doing it with this process makes it feel a lot more like I'm just coloring with a marker. In the past, when I've done pieces where I've done real flats, like an illustration, I'm going in, I want to separate all the different elements, like skin, costume, weapons, lighting effects, background elements. When I've gone in and flatted those for an illustration, the actual, hang on. You know what? I'll go over here and hide the sidebar on this just so I don't accidentally keep grabbing it. There we go. All these things that people who do completely digital work all the time have in their workflow that they've got mastered in terms of, like, you know, keeping your files out of the way so that people aren't distracted. Your stream's super professional. Still getting used to that. I got the whole streaming from my phone down pat. But it's odd how just changing one little thing in your workflow can change everything. But yeah, I was saying before about the workflow, just in terms of if you've ever watched color artists flatting their pages or having someone, you know, working off of the flats of another artist. This is one of those things where I'm starting to get lost in the detail. Like, I can come back and do the space between the fingers later. I really should just come in here and block all of these in. And that is one of the reasons why I like having 3 pages up at once, because it reminds me of how much territory I'm trying to cover. And one of the things, I think I mentioned last week, that because it's been a long time since I've been doing gray tones, like, because I finished last year was the first year that I didn't finish an issue. I spent so much time working on it, but I didn't actually publish an issue last year. So it's been over a year since I've been doing the gray tone phase, that I kind of had to reteach myself what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. Well, here is some good news for you guys. I made a cheat sheet that just basically breaks down my, you know what, just for this time, this will make it simple if we're about going off the edge of the page here. I made a cheat sheet breaking down the basics of my approach to gray toning each page. It's just a simple sort of a step-by-step. And I made it originally more for myself to just remind me what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to accomplish. Like, you know, keep me set on the big goals of laying out a page and gray toning it. And I realized that this would be useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make that cheat sheet a reward for my Patreon subscribers. And I'm just going to make a simple PDF of it. And I will post the first page or two of the cheat sheet, just a short, like 5-page PDF, kind of showing a step-by-step. But I'm going to put that on my Patreon account, and in the community tab for my channel, I'll post the first 2 pages plus a link there. So if you decide you would like to sign up, I'm going to make that one of the Patreon rewards. And you know what? I'm curious for you guys in the chat if you have ever subscribed to a creator's Patreon, and if so, what are the rewards that you enjoy most or have found most valuable? As I'm trying to find ways to make this channel and the Patreon membership more beneficial to viewers. In fact, I'm curious if there's anybody of you watching who's never heard of Patreon before, because if you haven't, I can tell you a little bit about it. as I'm drawing here, now that I've got a rhythm going, meaning I've kind of halfway through an activity, I can think a little bit more. Sometimes when I start drawing, I literally, for the first few minutes, I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And I need to just draw a little bit, get my sea legs under me, and figure out what's going on. But now that I am going, I can think a little bit more. And I'm thinking about another topic, another piece of subject matter that I had meant to talk about, both in terms of my live streaming and in my blog. And the thought is about social media. You see a lot of people leaving Twitter, leaving Facebook, because there's a lot of toxicity out there. A lot of people arguing, saying hurtful and pleasant things to each other on all sides of the political spectrum. And it's not necessarily about political, sometimes it's just personal beliefs, all kinds of different reasons why people are yelling and fighting and saying horrible things to each other. And I remember seeing an artist who I was following his work on Instagram and Twitter, and he decided that he was going to move off of social media. And I could see why he would make that choice, and I respect that choice. But it got me thinking. And I do believe that there are more people in the world that want to spread positivity than want to spread negativity. I think the difference is people that want to fight about things, argue with things, call other people horrible names. Those people work harder at it, but I think that the people who just want to connect with others, I think we outnumber them. So I am going to try and make an effort. I don't usually make resolutions. I just do what I'm going to do. But what I'm going to try and do in 2019, that's this year. What I'm going to try and do this year is just share something positive every day. And I don't mean sharing, oh, here's my work. I'm going to just, if I see a news story or just a picture of a kitten or a rainbow, or an inspirational quote or whatever, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and share something positive every day. Maybe I'll make it, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll miss a couple of days and I'll try, and you'll get a buttload of positive stuff on social media from me to make up for days that I miss. But what I'm thinking, the reason why I was thinking about all of this is because I can see the internet becoming such a toxic place that people that have a lot to offer and share with the world are just abandoning it. Because why should you have to put up with that kind of crap and abuse? But I think that we can detoxify the internet. That's what I'm thinking. I know it's a big idea, it's a crazy idea. But imagine detoxifying the internet. Imagine literally having it just be a place where people share ideas and communicate, and even if you have differing opinions, being able to just have a conversation with each other instead of just yelling and arguing and making other people feel like crap. I think that's an internet that all of us could get behind. That people, creative people particularly, that's what we really want. We want to share and communicate with each other. So my challenge to you guys is, instead of abandoning toxic platforms, let's detoxify them. Because I think positive voices, sharing positive ideas, can drown out the toxicity. There's people who put toxic ideas out on the internet, they work harder at it, but we have the numbers. We outgun them. So that is what I'm going to try and do. I'd like to put that challenge out to you. Maybe you don't have to do it every day of the year, but think about it. Next time you see something that really makes you feel good, share that with other people. And hopefully it may not solve the problem. I don't know if it'll even make a dent in the problem. But I'd like to think that we can at least try to make this internet more of something that we want, as opposed to just abandoning this amazing platform that we have because a bunch of people just want to make others feel crappy. So, detoxifying the internet. That's what I'm thinking about. as I draw my comic book about demons and angels rebelling. Maybe this is my penance. Maybe the idea is that because I'm doing a book about such a depressing subject, that I feel like I need to make up for it by trying to put some positive ideas out there. But I mean, even in Morningstar, I do believe that there's positivity just in the concept of exploring the idea of how something goes from having a lot of potential to be great into becoming something that's horribly evil. In a way, that's almost exactly what I'm talking about, because the internet, I think, has incredible potential for good. All right. So at this point, there's more rendering to be done on this page, but this is the point at which I would start using some of the other tones in this little strip and start actually doing the serious toning. So this is sort of like my block in is done. And at this point, I will jump around to another page. So let's go back here to having all three of these pages up. Let's go back into all right. All right, and now for some reason the splash pages seem like they require a little bit more attention in terms of blocking in my characters, my figures, whereas when I'm just doing an individual panel, and I didn't draw leaves into the this broken part of the tree. I think I kind of knew that I was just going to suggest with dots, light breaking through leaves, which allows the page to feel a little bit lighter and crisper, just like by not having every single panel have things drawn and rendered in there, letting the tones, the same way that a colorist would let the color do a lot of the atmospheric work. In this case, being that it's a black and white book, I'm letting value do some of that for me. Let's see here. And Rox mentioned in the chat that the negativity is overwhelming. Yes, in terms of the internet. And yeah, it's funny, 2019 is, I've gotten to the point now where it's like the years just roll by. They really do get faster and faster the older you get. I mean, I've never read any studies on it, but to me, it seems like there is a very straightforward, logical reason why that would be true, which is simply, as you get older, time becomes a smaller fraction of your existence. For instance, when you are 2 years old, 1 year is half of your life. When you are 50 years old, 1 year is 1/50th of your life. Exact same amount of time, but the relative proportion to your total existence is much smaller. Therefore, it seems to pass faster. It seems less significant. So for me, that's kind of how I started thinking about just the way that life really does seem to accelerate as I am slowly marching towards the grave. No, I'm just being playful morbid. You'll know when I'm being real morbid. Yeah, just filling in the spaces in between the characters gives me a little bit of a sense you know, just the basic framing. And there are some panels where, whoops, grab that too quickly. There's some panels where that's really the page even needs. It's just that separation of character and foreground. A panel like this, other than the fact that there's gonna be a slight value variation between Lucifer's skin tone and Raphael's skin tone. But yeah, I just try to keep this super simple. Speaking of super simple, I tend not to get overly elaborate with my my panel layouts. Actually, you know what? Before I move on to the next panel, I do want to have a little bit more light here. Light of Raphael's arm kind of crossing over. Yeah, my brush is a little too large here. Little Photoshop trick. If you hold down Control and Option on a Mac, which on a PC I think would be Command and Option, that instead of like you can actually go up to the numbers and change your brush size. You can also use the brackets, and if you hold it down, it gets the right bracket, it gets larger. If you hold the left bracket down, it gets smaller. A little keystroke that I just never even knew before, but if you hold down on a Mac Control and Option at the same time, what happens is your brush turns red for a second, and if you scroll to the right, it gets bigger. If you scroll to the left, it gets smaller. So you can just scale it up and down that way as well. And that was, I mean, even for as many years as I've been using Photoshop, because I've been using Photoshop since about Photoshop, I think version 3 or version 4. I don't mean CS3 or CS4. I mean Photoshop before Creative Cloud or whatever they originally called it when they had the CC. Like the original versions of Photoshop. So I've been using old school Photoshop for many, many years. And I'm sure that these keystrokes did not exist back then. But for as many years as I've been using it, that I still learn new tricks every day, and every year I learn new ways to optimize my workflow. And all these little things are, you know, you learn one little thing that saves you 30 seconds here, a minute there. Over the course of like a year's time, you may save several days, maybe even a week or two's worth of workflow. So it's worthwhile to always keep your eye out for little things that can speed you up. Now, I see more people, some comments in the chat, so let me take a look at those. Let's see. I see Content and Comments says, I have always wondered what paper size you use. Well, my paper size is 11 by 17. I draw on 11 by 17 Strathmore comic-sized Bristol board. When I'm working digital, what I do is, or actually, let me try and think of the easiest way to explain it, because I have a slightly convoluted workflow. But what I do is I draw my pages at 11 by 17, which tends to be the standard size for comic creation. When I lay my books out for print, when I do my lettering, I tend to do that at actual print size, which is 6.625 inches wide by 10.25 inches tall, plus a quarter inch around for a bleed, in case the book shifts in printing. That size is what I do my lettering at, and when I finish these pages that are 11 by 17 and I scan them in at 600 dpi just to get the lines crisp, I drop it down to 300 dpi and do my gray tones. I keep the 300 dpi file the same size, but I scale it down in Illustrator so that this file never changes its size, but in Illustrator it's smaller, so it'll So in theory, it's even a higher resolution than 300 dpi. And I position this underneath my lettering, which I think I'll probably do a live stream where I'm showing a little bit of that at some point, just so you guys can see what it looks like when I'm assembling a book. And if I don't do a live stream of it, then I'll at least record it for my Patreon, and I'll put a preview of that so you can get at least a taste of it. I see Amaris is in the chat. Hi, Amaris. Thanks for showing up. Let's see. She says, I'm working on a few commissions to help fund my comics. Good thing I have a huge a few knit commissions to help fund my comics. Good thing I have a huge stash of yarn for my teens. You know what? I am amazed that you're knitting commissions. That sounds really, really hard. I mean, knitting in general looks like a skill that takes a lot of patience and attention, which might be the reason why it would be attractive to a comic creator, because we have so many things clawing at our attention and so many things we're trying to do that maybe it's nice to have a project that it looks like knitting is a very meditative process. Like you can kind of sit there and just relax while you're doing it. Like you kind of have to relax because it requires patience. But the fact that you're doing knit commissions, that's just awesome. Let's see here. Content and comments also says I'm starting to like the simple panel approach more. Well, usually when I am laying out my panels, I start everything, as you can tell from this, even though this is one that was finished by another artist, I tend to lay all of my panels out in a Watchman style. I lay all of my pages out in a Watchman style 9-panel grid. Now what I do is I take the idea of, if you look at 3-panel gags, 3 or 4-panel gag strips, humor strips, whether they're webcomics or in the newspaper, they start with a very basic idea of there's a setup, a punchline, and then a reaction. But it really comes down to each comic strip is a small story. It's a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even if that beginning, middle, and end is part of a running gag that runs through a week or several weeks, there's a very basic a very basic story structure. Beginning, middle, end. Beginning, middle, end. So I treat each page as a story. Each page is a beginning and a middle and an end. It's a story unit. But within that, I will break the page into 3 tiers. So the first tier will be a beginning, the second tier will be a middle, the third tier will be an end. Depending on the pacing of the story, whether there's a big dramatic moment, it may only have 2 tiers instead of 3, or it may have 4 tiers. But maybe those 4 tiers will only have 1 panel each. So it'll be like kind of a Brian Hitch style letterboxed comic. I'm sorry I'm smacking my mouth a little bit. My mouth's a little dry, along with the dry throat, so I'm trying to drink a lot and rehydrate. If you're listening on your earphones, I apologize if you're hearing smacking. All right. But anyway, I try to start with a very basic 9-panel grid, and then I look at each tier. And I select this top tier, what's the beginning, what's the middle, and what's the end of that action. So I will literally just say for this one, Lucifer appears to be, and the dialogue isn't in here, but he appears to be claiming that he's going to finish off, you think that he's going to finish off the demons once and for all, because he's talking about finishing what he started, which, as you find out in this issue, is not finishing them off, but actually truly merging with them and taking well, you can say he's taking responsibility for them in a way, but he's making them part of his army along with the rebel angels to go back and wage an assault, a siege on heaven. But you have Lucifer addressing the demons, Raphael stepping in the way, believing that that destroying them is not the answer, and then him appealing to Lucifer on a personal level. So that's just the beginning, middle, and end. That's the story of just these 3 panels at the top of this center page. And what I'll do, once I know what the story beats are, is I'll say, how many panels does it take to show this story beat? So if you look at the entire page and it only takes 2 beats to tell it, then it would just be a 2-panel page. But starting with the 9-panel grid, I may realize that I can show everything I want instead of having a beginning and a middle and an end, I can just, so part of this is that this last page is a setup for what happens on the next page. So I don't need to have an end on this one. It's sort of like beginning and then a setup and then what happens on the third page, which is Lucifer gun-butting Raphael over the head and kicking him in the stomach. But I try to keep it so that even if I'm doing what may look like, even on this right-hand side, the closest I get to having elaborate page panels is having certain panels go off to bleed. I usually try to do that with their dramatic moments, and then doing things like inset shots when I have a lot of things going on. For instance, like Lucifer now addressing the rest of the demons and kind of giving them a hype battle speech before they're going to begin this process of melding with each other and building this army of angel demon hybrids. The fact that you're seeing him from the front talking to them and then seeing him from the back at the same time. So like the inset shot is more like a detail or a different angle of what we're seeing on this scene. For the most part, a lot of my panels are just either 3 or 6 panel, or 6 or 9 panel grids that are more simple and straightforward. All right, let me continue here. And Amaris says, I'm knitting fan art into sweaters. You know what, Amaris, do you have a link to your, you know what, I was going to say, in the comments, or actually, go ahead and post it in the chat if you want, a link to your page of where your commissions are. I don't know if it'll mark it as spam and then I'll have to come in later and repost it, but I think that's really cool. I would love to see what knitted fan art looks like. So I'll share it in the chat because I just think that sounds really cool. Or if you want, I can just, when we're done, like after the live stream, I'll go and I'll click on your name and go to, if it connects to your YouTube channel, your YouTube profile connects to your artwork, I'll repost that link on the description of this so everyone else can see it, because I think that just sounds really, really awesome. I think you're making some cool stuff. So. All right. Hang on here. All right. And this page, I am again falling into that trap of potentially putting too much detail. Well, this particular panel, but this is a detailed ass panel. There's a lot going on. You've got Lucifer and Raphael. They're framed by demons who are framed by the forest behind them. And it's funny, I was just talking about simplifying things, but at the same time, this page has become, this whole issue is definitely more detailed than issues I've drawn in the past. And I've mentioned over the course of inking it, that that's really out of my goal to draw better backgrounds and draw things that really feel like environments that the characters are in. So yeah, to a certain degree, this is definitely more detailed than I've done in the past. And I almost look at this process of balancing detail with simplicity as kind of like inhaling and exhaling. Like the same way that you can't just create artwork all the time without recharging your creative battery by going and watching a movie or reading other interesting books. I go through phases where I'm trying to make work simplified, and then I try to make it more detailed. And then I go back and I simplify things and I make them more detailed. And it's because I am still very much growing as an artist. I'm still learning things about my own creative process, about my own process of storytelling. And I try to leave space mentally for me to grow and explore. And it's not simply about, oh, I want to make sure my artwork is consistent so that people aren't confused by it. I don't want to make work confusing. but I want to give myself the room to say, oh, let me try this different approach in terms of how much detail I put in there, or spotting blacks on the page. Like, I've still never really done much clean line work where it's just, almost more like coloring book style. I think that tends to work better with color work, and I may do some color comics. Probably not my next book, and maybe not even the book after that. But at some point, I do think that it's something... Well, again, I don't know. The other thing is that if I were to do a color comic, I probably would be likely to want to hire a colorist instead of coloring it myself, only because I feel like my time is better spent actually the writing and the drawing. I have a great respect for color work, for color artists. I don't think it's the best usage of my time, in the sense that whenever you can share other parts of the creative process and hand things off so that you can really focus on the most important thing. If I'm writing and drawing the story, in theory, me writing it, if my story is the primary thing. Now, me drawing it, even that, I could, collaborate with somebody and have someone else draw some of my stories. But the drawing part of the process is one of the things I enjoy the most, and I really wouldn't want to give that up. I do find coloring interesting, and it's not that I don't like doing it. It's just not something I love as much as the writing and drawing. So if I were going to farm out another part of any phase of the process, coloring would probably be it. So I think the question of whether I would or wouldn't, and I see Amaris has shared her website. It's amarisportfolio.blogspot. So guys, go check out her knitted fan artwork. Thanks for sharing, by the way. I appreciate it. So yeah, someday we'll see some of my comics in color. There is a story in the Samurai anthology that I contributed to. Ion Rocks had mentioned earlier. Hang on, even though I like having all the pages up at the same time, as opposed to dragging this over, it's easier to just go to single frame, so I can just do this and leave that page in the position I already had it. I don't know if you hear the meowing. That's our cat Kachu saying, I want to take over. I would be happy to be your colorist. She wants to get her paws in everything. She's a very creative cat. I don't know if you guys can hear that raking sound through the stream, but there's this thing, it's like a little kitty comb brush type thing that you can strap to a table leg, because I don't know if you have cats, but they like to rub up against stuff, and the leg of my desk my drawing table is one of their prime rubbing areas, so I thought, well, this will allow them to get a little brushing and combing, and they just enjoy rubbing against it while I'm working. I find that the more that I'm doing these gray tones, the more I'm actually enjoying the process. And I think that I didn't necessarily have a workflow really blocked out. You'd think that after doing a whole other graphic novel and then 6 previous issues of this series that I would have a workflow really worked out. But it did really feel, up until this issue, like I've just been experimenting and a little bit of trial and error to figure out what I wanted. And now that I feel like I do have something, that a workflow that makes this feel like I'm just coloring, just drawing. Or it makes it feel very much like I'm working with markers. If I could get to the point of having color work feel that way, then that's something that would really make me a lot more interested in doing pieces in color. I do like doing my standalone pieces. Like if you go to my main website, jeremy.net, you can see art prints of some of my pieces. And I haven't been doing standalone pieces in a while because I've been taking so damn long to finish Morningstar. And I just said I want to put all of my energy into finishing this series in a reasonable amount of time. But I look forward to getting back to doing that, to doing just standalone prints, individual pieces. The marks I'm kind of putting out here are just sort of to indicate the sense of trees and shrubbery. And I know I could just grab a tree brush, something that has like a leaf pattern, and in one stroke put it in, scrape, just brush across and boom, I've got trees. And at a certain point, I probably will do stuff like that. But for now, I find it easier to just have like one brush that I'm using as opposed to going in and out and picking different brushes for different tasks. And some of the things that made it feel like working with a marker for me was actually taking my brush and squeezing it so that it's an elliptical brush as opposed to being completely round. And then putting it in angles, so it has sort of like a chisel tipped feel, not fear. Marker of fear. No, it has a chisel tipped feel, so it kind of feels like I'm working with a marker. And it's funny that I mentioned markers because, I've had a set of Prismacolor markers before, and I've tried doing marker studies, but I never really did a lot of work in marker either. It's always just tended to be either pen and ink, or if I was doing gray tones, it was doing washes with a brush. Something tells me, and I could be wrong, but something tells me looking at, whoops, stop grabbing that, that maybe I should have this curve out that way. So it's almost like this is kind of, the light of this area is sort of letting light flow in to the panel. I was going to ask you guys also. So, I harp on figure drawing because it helps me improve my craft a lot. If it weren't for the fact that I'm really trying to get this issue done and off to the printer, I have a bunch of sketches from January, now that it's February, and I was going to do my normal figure drawing review where I go through all of my drawings and look at which ones I'm going to keep for my blog and give sort of a mini self-critique. I decided to skip that this week so I could just, because I actually got a lot of positive responses from streaming the gray tones. So I thought, why not just keep going with this? Next week, I will likely either be doing more gray toning, or I will have moved on to coloring the cover. Whoops. Huh. I didn't block off this panel. So I don't do flats like a normal color artist, but the one thing I do is that I will go in and, let me unlock this, is I separate each panel so that way I can color them, well, I can gray tone them without worrying about coloring over the edges of the panel borders. This way I've just got all the flats are just selections so that whatever panel I'm creating, that panel is selected. The same way as like whatever, if you were doing flats for an entire figure or an entire panel where you're like, I've got the backgrounds are one set of flats, the skin tones are another set of flats, the clothing is another set of flats. Like there are sets of selections, that's what they are. I realized I neglected to select out this panel. So I just go through here. And I unlocked this layer so I can make tones on it, and I just pick a tone that is not touching this. Like the important thing is just that whatever it's touching is not the same value. So this panel is white, I want this panel to be some other value. So I could use the value of the main background. I could use a different gray. I mean, I could use any number of values or colors for them, but I just keep it to the sets of colors that the 5 values I'm doing. Well, 7 values because it's black, white, and then 10% through 50% gray. And it's just an artificial, it's an arbitrary decision that I've made to limit it to 5 tones. It's not like there's some sort of law as to why I do this or some coloring secrets of, oh, that's why he does it that way. It's like, no, I just had to decide how many values I wanted to do. I could have just limited it to just one color of gray, which when I first started Morningstar, that was one of the things that was difficult. That took a long time with me working out how I was going to gray tone the issue. Like I mentioned that it was trial and error at the start. A lot of that trial and error was simply, I started with saying, I'm just going to use one value of gray. And it might have been 50% gray. It might have been 30%. I can't remember what the number was. But I decided to just use one value of gray. And then if I had any other tones, I would just paint with a black brush at 10% on a low, at 10% opacity. And I would just slowly add in whatever darks I needed until things were the values that I wanted. And that did feel also very much like a marker process. But it also felt like I was figuring out what I wanted each page to be and kind of treating them as individual paintings instead of just sitting down and saying, all right, what is the cohesive color I want for the whole? Deciding in terms of the different skin tones and the fact that I kind of wanted both, since both Michael and Lucifer are of African descent, but I decided to have Lucifer have sort of a lighter skin tone versus Michael having a darker skin tone. Then I was playing with different values within that. And now I've kind of limited this even a bit more so that I wasn't getting too caught up into small details. And I think I'm going to have just a little bit, I should probably come back in here and put some more gray around it. That way this will frame the white corner that's going to be in here around Lucifer's head. So I do want little specks of white to kind of give the feeling of a forest in there, but I don't want too much. And actually, you know what? While it does bother me when I go off of the edge of the panel, if I go back to the 3 up and I turn off the tab for a second, now I can go back to what I was doing before, where I was trying to gray tone all of these pages at once. You know, what happens if I just go all the way to the edge here? Let this page open up a little bit. Then just a little bit of white in the background. Well, I haven't looked in a while to see if there were any questions or comments. Sorry about that. I got caught up in the process here. So let's see. There's a little question about Amaris's eye color. Let's see. Oh, there's a correction on Amaris's knitted fan art. It's Amaris J portfolio.blogspot. So don't worry, I'll find it. I'll put I'll put it in the actual description of the video. So I'll find the right one later and put it in there. Just for anyone who's watching later on, you want to check out cool knitted fan art. I see Mario Clemente is in the chat. Hey Mario, thanks for stopping by. He said excellent work, which I appreciate. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. All right, there we go. So now I have two cats because one of them, well, we have two cats, but now I have two cats on my desk. So this is one of the challenges. I have to move the keyboard around to make sure they don't walk on it, because I don't know if you people know, but cats love to walk and lay on keyboards, particularly if you're working. Anything you're doing that's not paying attention to them, they would like to stand on so that they can get a little bit of attention and love, which you can't be mad at that. An animal just simply wants your love and attention. How can you be, how can you be mad at them for just saying, hey, I like you, I want to hang around you? It's heartwarming. Even if it can be a tiny bit frustrating at times. So I'm going to finish off this page. We're almost at an hour here, so I will finish up this page and I will field any questions if anybody has any last minute questions. And then we'll end up calling it a wrap. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm just giving another reminder for people that came in late that I'm going to be testing out my live streaming later today. I don't know if it's going to be like in an hour or if I may not do it for like 2 or 3 hours whenever I get around to it. But I'm just going to be going on there and testing it so I can set up the whole scheduling a post ahead of time and then seeing if, and still being able to stream from my screen the way that I did when I was streaming from my phone. So if you see other notifications that I'm online streaming later today, you can ignore them. It's just going to be me going test 1 2 1 2, that sort of thing. So just mentioning that again. And to be honest, it's funny. I said that I wanted to mention it in case I forgot. And I have this odd thing where if I don't say anything and I just try to remember things, I don't. But simply the act of saying, hey, I'm afraid I'm going to forget this, so I'm telling you now. I tend to remember things if I tell people I think I'm going to forget, so I'm telling you now. So, or like Jerry Seinfeld, I'm telling you for the last time. Unless I tell you one more time before the stream ends. Yeah, see, I try to keep it really simple with the tones. Just the white, the black of the ink, a gray tone, and then what I would normally do. And I think if I'm still gray toning next week, then I will try to have a page just so you can see what it looks like when I'm doing the more detailed part of it. When I'm finishing it, as it were. And it really is just going in and saying, all right, as opposed to this black and white and middle gray, to just go in and add an extra tone of black where necessary, an extra tone. You know what? This needs a little bit. I'm going to leave gray in there like he's framed by leaves, only so that there'll be a little line of gray separating these two panels around it. So again, almost like giving Lucifer a little bit of a halo of light. He is the light bringer after all. But all I would really do once I've taken the panels to this stage is just go in and add like 1 or 2 values of dark and then maybe 1 or 2 values of light in areas where it needs to be separated. Like for instance, on this right-hand page that I'm working on now, that middle tier, I would probably go in with like the lightest gray that I have, the 10% gray, and I would paint in some 10% gray into the hills. And then I would take the demons that are here and I would use the 50% gray and I would paint that into the demons, maybe the foreground rocks, just to separate the whole foreground all together. Maybe even put some back here on behind the inset panel. So I'm using the color, I'm using the value, excuse me. I'm using the value more as a descriptive tool for separating elements than I am coloring it in terms of what is the value of this object. Is this object really a dark gray? Like for instance, Lucifer has a red kerchief around his neck, but because it's black and white, you can't really tell that it's red. The value, I usually just leave it the same as his skin tone, and I'll put a shadow in between to separate them, or I might put a lighter gray highlight on the top of the cloth that isn't necessarily on his skin. You know, little things like that. Ion Rocks had a little correction. He said, I said Lucifer is the light bringer, and he says it's the light bearer. For some reason, I'd always heard light bringer, but yeah, I guess light bearer could work too. I don't know. I've heard it differently in different books. There's a book on demons and mythology by, I think his name is Robert Mazzello, and it has a really beautiful cover. It's a picture of one of Gustave Doré's images of Lucifer falling from heaven. And damn it, I wish I could remember the name of it. But it's a book that's sort of like an illustrated short encyclopedia of demonology, witches, supernatural creatures. I remember I worked in a bookstore when I was in high school, and it was probably one of my, to this day, as much as I've loved working in the toy industry and working in different illustration projects, that job was one of my favorite jobs I've ever held, because I love books. And even though I don't read as many books as I don't read as many books now as I did when I was in high school or college. Just being surrounded by books every day and seeing new things come in, and I was kind of an information junkie. And, you know, seeing books on mythology and the supernatural were always, like, you know, I was the resident comic book nerd, so I was assigned to maintaining the graphic novel section, and there was sort of like this fantasy and sci-fi. Well, there was another guy who's also a sci-fi and fantasy reader. He wasn't as much into comics as I was, so it was sort of like I'd help him out, but, you know, that was kind of his territory. But with the mythology, and I ended up handling a lot of the New Age books, because there's just all sorts of different interesting things in there. And it might have nothing to do with whether it was aligned with any types of beliefs I had. I just found it interesting to see other people's thoughts and ideas and explore what they were doing. So this is some pretty good time. Normally, like I said, I find that when I'm drawing while I'm talking, I can do it at the same time, but I tend to draw a little bit slower. But what I've got blocked in is a pretty good amount of time. Like, I really would only need maybe another hour and a half. I mean, depends on how much detail I get into with each panel. But really, only that much more time to finish this other set, to finish these, take these pages to completion, is what I'm trying to say. So, there we go. All right, well, where was that? Anyway, we're going to wrap this up. As I have said before, let's see here. So, if you'd like to support this channel, get bonus videos, get a behind-the-scenes sneak peek at any of my works in progress, my creative process, you can go to patreon.com/Jeremy. If you'd like to check out free previews of my comics, including Morningstar, the current series I'm working on, you can go to comics.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to buy some of my comics, go to amazon.jeremy.net. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending time with me. If you like these videos, please press the like button, share them with others, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for spending time with me. That's it for now. Go be creative.